Hi, Jane.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Give me just a minute. I'm going to join you up there on stage.
Sounds good.
And I always hit the wrong buttons when I do that. I don't know why. All right, here we go.
All right.
Hello.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. We're glad you're here. Hi, Amber.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, we're all here. Wonderful. So, Amber, did you already set yourself up as a producer, or do I need to do that?
I think I am one.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. All right. Well, we're at 4:00, at least Pacific time. So we'll go ahead and get started. I know that we'll have people trickling in to join us and who are also listening live on our public profile page and on our social media channels. So I just want to welcome everybody. So hello, Firesiders. Welcome to Adventures by the Book, where our mission is to connect people and communities through the power of books. I'm your host, Susan McBeth, and here today is my co-host, Amber Reinhart. And we're delighted to be hosting fan favorite author Jane Ward to chat about her new novel, In the Aftermath. It's a beautiful cover, Jane, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
So today's Fireside Chat is part 1 of a 5-part series, Thankful for Reading, in which Amber and I will be chatting every week with a different author about a different book, hopefully get you into the holiday spirit or thinking of books you may want to read this holiday season or purchase for holiday gifts. We have an approximate 45-minute chat today. It's intended as a conversation, so anybody in our virtual audience is welcome to join us on stage at any time, ask your questions, make your comments, or just say hello to Jane. You also know that if you're in the virtual audience, you can broadcast our event live on your own social media channels, and you just go to the lower left-hand corner of your screen, the little circle, the hamburger button, and you'll see that Amber and Debbie are both broadcasting live. Thank you, ladies, for doing that. You just click on the globe, broadcast to your followers button, and you can do that as well. And thanks to those of you who are listening into our public profile page on our social media channels, and those who are right here live in our virtual audience. If you haven't already ordered a copy of Jane's book, In the Aftermath, you can visit our website, adventuresbythebook.com. You'll see that address in the fortune cookie portion of the screen, in the very middle of your screen. And we'll ship that book right to you so you can enjoy reading it after getting to chat with Jane today. But let's go ahead and get started. Jane Ward is the author. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm getting notices here. Jane Ward is the author of The Mosaic Author and Hunger, The Mosaic Artist, and Hunger. And before that was a contributing editor for an online regional food magazine and a blogger and occasional host of cooking videos. It's kind of funny. We just hosted a cooking class in my home today. So it's all about the food today, which I love. In her new novel, as I showed you earlier, In the Aftermath, David Heron, overwhelmed and despairing after his family's business and finances are in ruin due to the bursting lending bubble of 2008, he takes his own life one chilly spring morning. But he has no idea the ripple effect his decision will set into motion. We are delighted to be having you join us on Fireside today. Jane, welcome and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you. And I'm delighted to be here. I can't think of a better thing to do than celebrate books and reading. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. We're pleased to have you. So I have some questions for you. I'm going to turn it over to Amber. I know she has some questions for you as well. We'll open it up to audience Q&A. Again, the audience can join us on stage anytime they want, even though we have a designated time at the end. If there's something pressing you want to talk about, feel free anytime. But I'd like to get started like I usually do, is kind of getting to know the author before you were a successful writer. Can you
Mm.
talk a little bit about, growing up and what your first exposure to reading, books, writing were? If there was somebody special that inspired you along the way?
Yeah, it all started in my home. My mother read to me a lot. My sister, who's older than I am, taught me how to read. We were encouraged to go to the library, and once I found the library, it was like a safe space, and also just a you know candy land for me. Instead of a place there was candy, it was books, and I just always have loved them. And reading was a bit of a refuge. I was a really shy child, so I found it very safe to be around books and letting my imagination wander, and travel to all sorts of different places, and just a very comforting, safe place for me to be. And I've always loved books. And I think it was just the love of books that made me realize that what I really wanted to do was write them and have the same effect on other people, perhaps, that books had on me when I was young.
Wonderful. And you said that you traveled to many places in your books.
Yes.
Where were some of your favorites or most memorable?
Oh gosh. You know, I I read a lot of children's books that were set in England, and my grandmother were from Scotland, but I had never been there. And as a child, just being able to kind of be in those different worlds that they knew, but that I didn't know, was a great deal of fun for me. That was probably my first exposure to really wanting to travel to and see the world. Other places, there were just other parts of the United States that I had no idea. I grew up in Massachusetts, hadn't, at a very young age, hadn't really been anywhere else but New England. Just being able to go to places like California in books, and the West, and finding out all of these, people who were living parallel lives to what I was living. And that always fascinated me, was if I stopped to think about it. What I was doing in my life, someone was doing something, thousands and thousands of miles away at the same time. And that was just sort of mind blowing to me. And having those books was a way to connect with that. So, yeah.
Agreed. I remember traveling to the Island of the Blue Dolphins was always one of my
Oh,
favorite books growing
yep,
up.
yep,
Yeah. So
definitely.
can you share a little bit about your trajectory through all those fields of interest you've held before as a writer? I mean, I know we talked that you were a food magazine blogger, an occasional host of cooking videos. I think a baker too, which I
Hmm.
find fascinating.
Yep.
And how all those experiences influenced your writing, or that you've drawn upon the knowledge for your writing.
Well, I went to college and decided I was going to be a physical therapy major, and I started out in that for about a year. I've always loved sciences. Ran into a bit of a roadblock with the mathematical end of things, like in physics. So I changed my major to English, which is where I wanted to be all along, I think, and just started writing papers, obviously, for all of my classes, and I just really enjoyed it. It was a way to express myself that I didn't have, as a shy person, didn't really have access to in other ways. So I found it as a good way to express myself. When I graduated, I tried to get some jobs in publishing and whatnot, but all throughout this trying to find work was the fact that I came from a house where cooking and eating was very important. I knew a lot about it. So I just sort of, like a lot of people in the arts do, I gravitated towards the food world. And it was a very accepting world, and where I could do a lot of different things. And I started out in catering and party planning and planning people's special events, and I really enjoyed doing that. I really knew a lot about food back then, and less so now. I'm not really keeping up with so much now, but the baking end of it and the seasonal cooking end of it, I still do, and I'm still very passionate about it. And it was a way to sort of have a job when I needed a job in order to write. When you're writing and you're not really selling anything, when you're a young starting out writer, it's good to have that backup. And this was a great place for me to land, and it was a comfortable world for me to be in. And I still enjoy all of that. I do a lot of cooking. I'm in my kitchen here right now. This is my comfortable space. And it's just where I feel the most at home, and also very creative. So,
Do you have an aroma in your kitchen right now that we can imagine?
I made a brisket because my husband's going away on a trip, so it smells very briskety in here, which is kind of a nice. Although it's like 65 degrees in Massachusetts, it's supposed to be a little cooler right now, but it smells very fallish and kind of nice in here.
Oh, wonderful. Well, you talked about your childhood and traveling to different places through these books, and then you talk about baking and cooking
Mhm.
and all these wonderful things and feel good. And now we're talking about your book, which is,
Yeah.
about the economic downturn of 2008. And I'm not a spoiler here to say it's about suicide
Yeah.
because, that's talked about right in the beginning and on
Yeah.
the jacket of your book. So why
Yeah.
did you decide out of all the topics, feel good topics, to write about this particular, the downturn in suicide?
Yeah, I actually didn't set out to write about a suicide, but I did want to set the book in that time period. It was a really sort of interesting time period for me, and living through it and watching how different people made their way through it was an interesting thing to me. And I thought it would be a good way to explore character development. And when I started writing the book, I was not intending to have a suicide be the sort of catalyst for everything that happened. But the catalyst that I had planned was just sort of not really working out. I thought maybe a person could just, he's overwhelmed with these problems, he'll just run away from his life. But it's, once you start thinking about how a person has to leave a life and then create a new life, and how they evade being found out all this time, it's very cumbersome to write about. And I realized that it had to be something that was a little bit more final. And the book, it sounds like, well, it starts out with a suicide. It's not really about the suicide. It's about all the people who are affected, and how our lives are all intertwined, and how we're all connected, and how we help each other through, and how we sometimes can't do that. And the suicide is always there in the background. But I like to think it's a very hopeful book. I don't think it's, it doesn't really wallow in the depressing aspect of it. But it certainly, I didn't want to gloss anything over or take anything lightly. This was once I decided to throw myself into this subject, I knew that I would have to treat it with respect. And it's something that is happening a lot, and we see it a lot. And the more people come up and talk to me and tell me what their experiences are with it, I realize that, maybe this was the story that I had to write, even though I didn't intend to start out with it.
And so why did you said you intentionally wanted to write about that time period in the economic
Mhm.
downturn. Was there
Yep.
something in particular that triggered that? Was it a personal experience, something a family or friend went through, a story you heard about, or?
Not really personal, but I living through it and watching. The country was also the changing at the time. People, when they're faced with these difficult times, they have to make decisions to either move forward and find new ways forward, or they try to hold on to the past and keep doing things in the past the way they've always done them. And that sort of was fascinating to me as a person who likes to think about why people do what they do. It was just one of those moments in time, I think, for me, that was very remarkable and deserved to have me pay some attention to it. It was a time of change. It was a time of great change. We had to all, either individually or as a country, move into new things, finding new ways forward. The old ways weren't working anymore. Everybody's lives were blowing up on some level, and we had to get through it together. And that's sort of that whole personal, but also community, um, movement that was fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And living through it as well myself,
Yep.
you remember how many people were affected by it, and you can
Right.
see that, suicide was was a natural outcome of that
Hmm.
for probably many people. And
Hmm.
I like that you focused on and the title of the book, In the Aftermath, because really when you think about it, it's who's left behind after a suicide. Um, that has to pick up all the pieces and move on. And can you talk a little bit about that, why you decided on the aftermath and which characters, why you decided on those particular characters? Because I thought that was an interesting choice as well.
Sure. Well, I think the more I talked to people and the more reading I did in preparation for writing this, the more I realized that the people who are left behind, as you said, the ones who are left to pick up the pieces, they're often they're often subjected to or feel they're subjected to scrutiny by others. Why didn't you know this was going to happen? Why didn't you do anything to prevent it? How did you not see this was coming? And about the person who's actually taken his or her own life. How could they be so selfish? So that's sort of I was interested in giving grace to the people who lived through it. Because I don't think that all of those questions are deserved for them. Everyone's just holding on and doing what they can do. So I wanted to really focus on them, show that their lives move on, how they have to move on, all the different things they have to work through, the grief, the anger, the frustration, the guilt even that they have for being the survivors when someone else hasn't survived. And it seemed to me important to focus on that when there's so much misunderstanding about the way people are talked about or treated after something like this happens in their family.
Agreed. I mean, you can see that with many crimes, right? I mean, like rape. It's what were you wearing? Why were you out at night alone? It's like,
Right. Right.
why are we focusing on that?
Right.
So
Right.
I'm glad I'm glad you did this. But
Yeah.
so without giving too much away, because we want
Okay.
people to read the book, can you talk
Mhm.
about a little bit about the characters you chose to follow in
Yes.
the aftermath and why
Yep.
you chose them? Or
Yep.
and
I
maybe
yep.
a little bit about the storyline. Anything you want to share that doesn't give too much away.
Okay. Well, it's about a husband and a wife who own a small bakery, which is sort of a cornerstone of their community in the downtown. And it's a small business. It's a family-owned business. And when the husband decides that he's made some bad decisions and he can't face moving forward, he can't face talking to his wife about it, he takes this awful and irrevocable decision to take his life. So I naturally follow his wife and his daughter who are left behind, but also his best friend, who he was supposed to, get together with that day, and the friend is late for a meeting, so that never happens. And then, so that's the nuclear sort of group around David, who is the owner of the bakery. But then there's also the fallout of the police detective who was initially charged with looking into what happened to David and has made some wrong assumptions about the whole thing and carries a lot of guilt about that once she learns that she's been wrong all this time. And the last person I really focus on is the banker who lent all the money to David and to Jules, the family who owned the bakery, and also David's parents, who are also living with certain decisions that they've made. And it just sort of shows how everyone, one person's decision just doesn't affect that one person, and it affects all of these other people as well. And we're taken on a sort of journey into what happens in each of their lives as well, and how they work through the mistakes they made and what they're feeling after David's death.
Yeah, and when you talk about what they're feeling after
Mhm.
death, let's talk a little bit about closure, because people feel like they need closure
Right.
in times like this, but is there really a sense of closure when somebody commits suicide and there's so many unanswered questions and unknowns and
Right. Well, somebody else asked me that question not long ago, and I really think there is, in the way that we think about closure, there really is no closure. There's just some sort of idea that yes, I can go on. It's going to be difficult. It's not always going to be, as good as I feel right now. I might feel bad tomorrow, but I know I can go on. And maybe that's the only sort of closure you can hope for, is that you have the strength within you to just keep putting one foot in front of the other and going forward, and recognizing that some days will be good and some days won't be good. And that's, I left the book on a sort of hopeful note, but sometimes I go back to these characters and I wonder, what are they doing now? Did they have a good day? Did they have a bad day? And I think that's pretty much the way life is. And that's sort of what I wanted to convey with the movement of the book to the end.
right. And so did you have to do any kind of research, or did you have experience on a personal level somehow, or with suicide? And I know you talked about the economic downturn, you had personal experience with that, but how did you have to do research for this, and how did that help you, and what did it help you with?
Yeah, I did have to do research, and at the time, I did not have any. I did not have any personal experience with suicide. So I did read a lot of, I read a lot of memoir, I read a lot of blogs, I read a lot of psychological, Psychology Today sort of articles and papers and things like that to kind of understand, not just the person who was feeling so overwhelmed, but also the people who were touched by the death. And I think, um, as I said earlier, the minute the book came out and I would start to talk to readers, people would come up to me afterwards and say, this happened to me, and what you captured how I felt at this particular moment. So I think just being able to read so many different accounts of what people have gone through, it sort of made these characters, have some of those characteristics, and to carry the story forward in a way that I felt respected what I had read, without taking somebody's personal experience, but just sort of taking traits and applying them to the characters in the book.
And I know you wanted to write this novel as a hopeful book,
Hmm.
but it had to be really difficult to write
Yeah.
uh, this topic and the
Hmm.
story. And I'm wondering how you got through that, what you told yourself, how you managed that.
Lots of dog walks, lots of breaks, and lots of taking my dogs out for long walks and just getting out into the nature and just sort of nothingness of being outside. It was overwhelming at times. There's a lot of emotion. I think when you write a book, it's maybe people think that you're just writing a story and you're not affected by the emotion in it, but it's very heavy sometimes. And there were points in this book that were pretty heavy, and I would realize they were getting too heavy when I was writing it, and I wasn't actually getting to what I wanted to say. I was sort of, okay, that's good. I've done enough. I'm going to move on now. And I knew that I had to dig a little deeper. So that was when I would just take a break. Taking breaks, taking the dogs outside was a good one. Just sort of focusing on other things, baking, cooking, spending time with family, things like that were all good breaks. But then just being able to come back to it with that sort of, okay, I can do this now, and I can get into that deep emotion, and I've sort of replenished at the well, so to speak, and I can get back there. And but it was tough at times. It was a tough book. And then, since I started the beginning of writing it, I did actually experience within my sphere of people taking their lives. So it
Mm.
was kind of like, oh, now I feel like I'm at a point where, if I talk about this, am I being disrespectful now that I know somebody who's gone through this? Or do I just keep going on because I think the story is important to tell? And I had to take some time to think that through as well. And so, yeah, it was a tough book to write. No,
Yeah.
no more death for a while in my books. I've decided it took a toll.
Well, I know I could talk to you forever, but I know Amber has some questions that she was anxious to talk to you about. So Amber, you want to take it away with your questions?
Hi. Can you hear me, Jane?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. It's so nice to meet you. I haven't had the pleasure to read your book yet, but I will. So I'm very excited to read it. But I just want to remind the audience really quick before I ask a couple of questions to Jane. If you have any comments or questions, or if you just want to say hi, now is your chance as we're getting towards the later portion of the episode. So please don't be afraid to jump up on stage. We really want to hear from you, and Jane wants to hear from you. But I'll go ahead and start with a question while we wait for people to come up on stage. So I actually went on your website, like preparing for the episode and whatnot, and on your main page, you have like a picture of Winnie the Pooh, like the cover of a book, and a quote that says, "I was the kid who read early and from then on proceeded to lose myself in books and make believe." So I just want to know the story behind why you chose that quote and why you chose that book, because I myself really loved like Winnie the Pooh and that whole series. So yeah.
That was one actually I read to my kids a lot. I grew up in a big reading family, and I read to my kids a lot, and that was something we read a lot together. So that was an important image for me. But that quote, oh gosh, I tell a little bit of a story on the website, and I credit my wonderful website developer with really asking me some good questions and digging deep to get some stories from me for the content of the website. So it's whatever you see there is all me. But she asked about my childhood and what was a formative experience. And I said, well, the first thing I can remember is being a daydreamer and being in kindergarten. And I asked to go to the restroom, and I thought I was in there for maybe 2 minutes, and then I hear this knock on the door. The teacher had sent someone to come and get me because I was there forever. But I was like in my mind thinking about all these, stories and daydreaming. And that was the first time I realized that I really needed to stay locked on to the real world, or I was going to get sort of lost in school. But that's just the story of my life, and it still happens now. I'll be doing something and just sort of, time just disappears. And I think that's why I like baking so much, is because when I'm making bread, I can be sitting here kneading or rolling, and my mind can just wander, and I don't really have to be locked on to, I've got to get here, I've got to do this appointment, I should be doing that. It's just all like hand motion and whatever's going on in my mind. So I've tried to find a way as I grow up to use it to my advantage, as opposed to when I was a kid and getting in trouble.
No, I love that. It's such a sweet story, and it really helps the readers get to know you a little bit better. And speaking of your readers, in the course of writing this book, is there anything that your readers have taught you along the way, whether it's feedback, reviews, or just support?
Oh, readers are so important, and I hope they know how important they are. I think every author loves to hear from readers, and I always enjoy hearing things from people. It's been particularly hard over the past year or so, because when I launched the book, everything was still virtual. So I would see comments and read reviews and things, but I missed those sort of moments where after a book signing or reading, people could come up and say something to you. But a couple of things really stand out to me. I had a really nice note after The Mosaic Artist came out, and don't want to go into too many details, but we in 2015 moved to Switzerland for about 3 years, and I was getting mail from the United States sort of in bundles, and I didn't see this letter for a while. But I had a really nice letter from a reader who I didn't even know, from somewhere out in, I think it was either Minnesota or Wisconsin. And she said to me that she read the book at a time when she was going through something similar as the characters were going through in the book. And it meant a great deal to her to have someone put that down on paper and represent it, and it made her feel validated. And things like that, things that, from people I know, from people I talk to, it's all so important, because what we do as writers is so solitary and so isolated sometimes. It's nice to know that, some whatever you feel like you have to say, I always feel compelled to say it, but that there's someone on the other end who is finding it worthwhile to listen to. So that's always very helpful.
Oh, yes, I totally agree. And I think that every time we read a book, we kind of keep a piece of it with us, and you can live through different lives that way. And so it's always so special and unique. And so, what maybe this book in particular, or just your writing, what do you want readers to get from it? What's the overall message that perhaps you want people to take away?
I think from this book and all of my stories is just sort of to take a step back and think about the people in these situations, think about what other people are going through. Think about, maybe it's something you don't know. Either you've never had any contact with someone who's committed suicide, or in my past book, someone who's gone through a divorce and an estrangement. Maybe you don't know those situations, but the thing to take away from as you're immersing yourself in the stories is that maybe the characters are opening you up to something you don't know, and it makes you stop and think, oh, well, now I understand that a little bit better. And I write a story because it's something that I would like to read, and it's something that I want to understand. I'm always writing towards the answer to a question for myself, like, why did this happen, or what's going on here? So if someone is on the reading end of it and they're asking themselves those same questions, that's really what I've intended, because I've intended it for myself. So
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I think a lot of writers, they try to like make sense of the world through their writing.
I
And
think so.
maybe you start with an idea and then you find something else at the very end that you never even started with. And
That's
that's,
right.
yeah,
That's
it's
right.
so exciting and it's fun. And so I'm an aspiring writer, and I'm sure there are others in the audience, but what advice would you have to us, or even to your younger self when you started out?
Oh gosh, I spent a lot of time, being very undisciplined. So just learning that discipline of sitting down and making time for it, even though I know as writers we often have to have other jobs, but just finding that space and time for yourself and for your writing is important. I think it's also important to sort of start thinking of yourself as a writer, even though you don't have anything published. If you've set yourself up in your world where you have this routine, start talking about yourself as a writer and tell people that you are a writer or you're an aspiring writer. Don't be shy of that. And surround yourself with people who are doing the same thing. And I think that's important too, and be each other's support. There's no real reason to see other writers as competition or anything but just supportive friends. Reach out to people, ask them for help, ask them for advice. It's really important to start building that community.
I like when you said right now that you can like call yourself a writer.
Yep.
I'm curious, when did you have that moment where you realized I am a writer and I'm gonna start calling myself that?
It was actually in college in a creative writing class.
Oh,
I was dreading having to bring some work. It was like one of our final projects, and we all had to read. And again, as I've said I'm so shy, but I had to get up and read. And after I read, there was like complete silence in the room, and I thought, oh no. But then everyone just burst into this spontaneous applause, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, maybe this wasn't as awful as I thought it was. Maybe I've actually said something to somebody. So that was the first moment where I thought, this is really what I need to be doing. And I feel like I'm a writer now. I really,
oh,
I didn't need the acclaim, or I didn't need the the applause, but just knowing that I reached people in that audience was a really good feeling. And that was the moment where I felt like, okay, I can do this.
Oh, what a powerful moment. And I see
Yeah,
that
it was.
Debbie wants to ask a question, so I'm gonna let her up on stage.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get her up. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Amber. Hi, Susan. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Debbie.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Jane. I'm reading your book right now, and
Okay.
it's hard to put down. I'm about halfway through, so I'm really appreciating it so far. So I have a couple questions for
Yeah.
you. First question is, and maybe I missed it, I apologize. How long did it take you to write this novel?
I started writing that in 2014, and I finished it probably 2019. So 5 years, but then it goes into the sort of editing process with the editor, and there was some tweaks after that. So there was another year. It was ready to go by about 2021. So and I'm slow, so it always takes me a while to get something finished. I'm not a good typist. I was very resistant as a young person to learn how to type. So I write everything longhand, and then I have to go back and like two-finger type it. So it's a little bit arduous for me, but but I'd say it takes me about good 5 years to finish something.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm wondering during that time, so you clearly wrote about something you knew about as far as the bakery business. And oh my gosh, I'm really drawn into that. I really can picture it and visualize it, and I can be there in the bakery, and I'm thinking about, wow, this is what they have to do. They have to get up in the middle of the night and do this. And the burns, just getting your arms caught on the oven. And I really could visualize that. So I really appreciated that. So my next question relates to that then is, I think I heard you mention, and I know I read somewhere that you hadn't experienced personally a relationship with someone that had gone through a suicide, but that happened during your writing process. You did then encounter something.
It did a couple of years into writing it. Yeah.
So my question is, did that change your storyline?
Well,
Having that personal experience?
it really did. It really made me question whether I was going to be able to finish the storyline, whether it would be disrespectful to continue with the story, whether I was going to get it right, whether the person who I knew that went through this would think that I was taking some of their experiences. So a lot of it just made me very conscious of what I was actually putting on the page and making sure it was not any one person's experience. It was just an amalgam of everything I had read and ways that I expected people would act in these situations. But yeah, it definitely did affect the way I moved forward with the book. I think it gave me a little bit more awareness and made me be very careful with the characters and respectful of them and wanting to just sort of not exploit anything. I didn't want to write anything exploitative and
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked
sensationalized
that,
it.
Debbie, because I had the same question. I'm curious too. Did you talk to the family and say, "Hey, I'm writing this book. It had nothing to do with you guys," or did you talk to them at all, or was that awkward?
It was awkward. It was awkward. But you had to I had to do it. It was tough. And I think there were some moments where everyone had to go back and think about what was being said and what I was doing going forward. But that was sort of after I thought about whether I was going to move forward with the storyline at all, was when I moved forward with talking to people. But yeah, wasn't something I'd want to do again. But you never want to, when you're writing something, it's always supposed to be fiction. You don't want to take somebody else's story. And I really, really wanted to be aware and wanted the other person to be aware that it wasn't their story. It was the character's story. And I wasn't going to take anything from what they went through and exploit that. So I think I did a good job.
Yeah, thank you for taking so much care with such a tender topic and just for the respect that you gave to it. And I think that is helpful for people. Amber was talking about, authors are trying to make sense of the world with the writing, but certainly it benefits readers too. I mean, we're all trying to make sense of the world too, so it's great to get perspectives and insights and to learn from other people. And so thank you for writing, and I'll step off stage now, but I'm really enjoying this. So thank
Thanks for
you.
those questions. I really, those were great questions.
Absolutely.
Thought-provoking. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I'm sorry, I have a Chihuahua, so I'm sorry if you hear some barking in the background. Hopefully she will stop barking.
My two dogs are snoring right now, but that could change at any minute. But anyway, I get it. I totally get
So
it.
Jane, what's next on the horizon for you? Do you have any projects or anything you can share with us?
Yeah, I'm working on a new novel. It's still in very early stages, still trying to figure out where it's going. I sort of have an idea of where I want things to go, but I never start out with an outline or a definite story of beginning, middle, and end. But it's about motherhood and adoptive motherhood, giving children up for adoption. Another subject I really don't know too much about, so I'm doing a lot of reading about that, and it's a fascinating world that I'm sort of throwing myself into, and who gets to call themselves a mother, and what makes you a mother. Is it just because you've had a child, or because you mother other people? So there's a lot going on in this, but I'm really excited about this project, and I think motherhood's it's a fascinating topic to me. So
Oh yeah,
see if it fascinates other people too.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about that one later on. Congratulations too on that.
Thanks.
And so, where can fans or readers find you on social media? Do you have any platforms that you use?
Yeah, I'm right now still on Twitter. And I have to give a plug to Twitter because poor Twitter is going through a hard time right now. But it's since 2009, it's been my favorite platform. So we'll see what happens to it. But I'm author Jane there. I'm on Instagram at author Jane Ward, and also on Facebook with my full name, Jane Alessandrini Ward, author. So you can find me there, but I also have a website that'll have janeaward.com. That'll have all the social on there too. So if you want to connect, I blog on there too, but I haven't been blogging all that rigorously lately, but I have to get back to that. But so there's different things to follow on the website as well.
And you can also follow Jane now on Fireside. All you have to do is click on her icon and hit follow. And anytime she's on Fireside, you'll get notice of her chat. And you can do the same with Amber and me. We usually meet weekly with different authors. And if you follow us, you'll get notification of the events we're doing. So I hope you do that.
Yeah, you've got some good ones coming up in the next few weeks. So yeah, I'm excited to see them.
We're very excited. Yes.
Yeah,
So thanks for kicking it off.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm just so thrilled you invited me to do that. It's great.
And my last question before I pass the mic back to Susan is there anything else you want to let readers know or the audience know that we haven't talked about today?
Just go back to what I was talking about earlier with your authors. If you have a favorite author, don't hesitate to reach out to them. Find them on social media, send them a nice note, write them a review, spread the word through word of mouth about their books. It's a great feeling to know that you have readers out there who are taking the time to appreciate what you've done, and also to let their friends and family know that they've liked your book very much. It's just a great feeling, and it's I can't stress that enough, that we do this in isolation, but we don't do it for ourselves. We do it so that people will pick up a book and read it and somehow be touched by it. So anytime you can reach out to your faves, you should do it, and don't feel nervous, because we all love it. We love hearing from you.
And speaking of, Jane is a Novel Network member. So for anyone in the audience who has a book club or wants to join a book club, you can invite Jane to your book club and chat with her one-on-one about her book, and you get her all to yourself. So I highly recommend that. And thank you so much for the lovely conversation, Jane. And I will pass it back off to Susan.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Amber, for the great questions. And as a reminder, In the Aftermath is available at your favorite bookseller or on our website, adventuresbythebook.com, which is in the middle of your screen in the fortune cookie button. You can get your link there. And as a reminder, Jane is part one of a 5-part series, Thankful for Reading. Each week we talk to a different author. Next week we're talking to novelist Jennifer Steil, who will be talking to us all the way from Europe to talk about her World War II history novel, Exile Music. We also have a couple other fireside events coming up in I forgot the date, but you can see on our, if you're following us, that we are going to be talking with Maroon 5 founding drummer Ryan Dusick about his memoir, which is going to be fascinating. We're also going to be doing a from book to film experience with a best-selling author and a filmmaker who is turning one of her stories into a film. So you can see that and talk to the filmmaker and one of the stars in the movie and also the author. That's going to be fun as well. So I think that's all that we have, unless there's anybody last minute who wants to invite themselves up on stage and ask any last minute questions before we close out. While we're just giving our readers one last chance to come up on stage, I'm going to mention a couple events we have coming up. Besides fireside events, we do events on Zoom. We do a popular book bingo where we host 6 authors. We give away 6 books. Every month, every quarter, depending on what our schedule is. And we have one coming up shortly with 6 best-selling authors, including New York Times and international best-selling author Martha Hall Kelly, which will be fun. We also do in-person events. We're based in Southern California. We do move around sometimes, but most of our events are in Southern California. So if you want to travel here or you're in the area, come visit us. We are just announcing our very popular super book year 4. So in February, we started this 4 years ago aboard the Queen Mary in Long Beach, and we had a request to do a book-related event on Super Bowl weekend because people were tired of football. And so we thought we'd set it up like a football game. We invited 20 authors, 2 teams of 10 authors each. We had 4 quarters of excitement. We had fan-friendly food. We even had a New York Times best-selling author who sang the national anthem for us. To this day, it remains readers' and authors' favorite event. We get requests for it all the time. We're coming back with Superbook 4 on February 16th in San Diego. We already have an incredible lineup. We have Julia Whalen, who is an internationally renowned audiobook narrator. She reads for Kristen Hanna, Taylor Jenkins Reid, Tara Westover. Over 500 books she's read. She's got her own book. She's coming with one of her authors that she's read for New York Times bestselling author Alison Wynne Scotch. She'll be there, as well as Ryan Dusick, the former founding drummer of Maroon 5. We're also going to have Robert Dugoni. Sorry, I've got 2 Roberts I'm thinking of. Robert Dugoni, who wrote The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell. We've got an amazing roster set up for you. So check out our website, adventuresbythebook.com, to get more information. But Jane, it's been a pleasure today. Thank you again for chatting with us, for your beautiful book, In the Aftermath, in bookstores now. And until next time, everybody, thank you, everybody in the audience, for attending. And you can see the review on YouTube. I think it takes a day or 2 to convert over, but you'll see it there. And you can share it with your friends who may have missed it, or if you want to listen to it again. But until next time, ask yourself this question: what is your next adventure by the book? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.